Welcome into the OBR post-game show. The Cleveland Browns lose 20-3 to the Miami Dolphins in their final home game of the season. My name is Brad Ward. Good to have you here joining us. Good to see you all filing into the chat. I have my esteemed panel with me, the always fantastic Pete Smith, where you can find him on Blue Sky Social at pete-smith.bluesky.social. And, of course, Jack Duffin at Jack Duffin. Gentlemen, interesting game today. I know the outcome you were looking for, Jack. I think we're at the point now that the Browns have are they firmly in the third position now? Yes. 2 thumbs up. So that's where we are. There are some takeaways from this game, certainly, that are positive. Some questions as well. But we will, and we'll hash through all of that. Do you really, Jack?
Yeah, I've still got music playing. Is that just me?
Just you.
Just you, brother. Do you have maybe a YouTube on in the background or something?
No, I'll work it out.
You work it out. All right, good. Maybe it's just in your head. You're celebrating the loss. Pete, what are your initial takeaways from this one? Things that jumped out to you in the Browns loss to the Dolphins today?
So I didn't realize how badly I wanted the Browns to lose until Tua became doubtful. At that moment, it crystallized for me because there was nothing to be gained here. Like, if you beat Tua and Jalen Waddle and the full Dolphin squad, I felt like there was a pelt you could hang on your wall, not Tyler Huntley and whatever was left. So it got to the point for me where I was just really happy to see defense play really well. The D-line continues to be really fun, and the offense was largely what I expected it to be. DTR is a third-string quarterback who looks like a third-string quarterback. He's got little or no help with the amount of injuries they're dealing with, and the Browns secured what is now third pick. The Browns have at least secured the ability to draft what I hope they're going to do if they're stuck at this spot is Abdul Carter. I didn't want to end up in no man's land, and at least right now they aren't. Like, if the draft was to happen today, I fully expect the current draft order would be Patriots followed by Titans. I fully expect the Patriots would trade down with the Titans one spot. The Titans would trade up. They'd take Cam Ward. The Patriots would then take Travis Hunter at 2, and the Browns would take Abdul Carter at 3. And I'm fully prepared as a veteran of combat with Myles Garrett versus Mitch Trubisky. We're not doing that. We're not. Shedeur Sanders is not a thing. Stop. It's not real. That is not a real thing. Abdul Carter is a real player. He's a special player, and you can argue all you want about how they need a quarterback, and I agree with you, but they're not even in the same stratosphere as far as players. And you can force that pick if you have to, but you're going to lose out and miss on a player, which would have been the exact scenario that the Browns ended up with had they taken Mitch Trubisky over Myles Garrett, which would have been one of the most ridiculous overreaches ever, to not only take the wrong quarterback and miss on what is going to be a Hall of Fame talent, but to then watch other quarterbacks go in the same draft who are also going to be so much better than anyone else you could have drafted. So that's an insane position to take. I'm just not going to stomach it. So look, we didn't learn anything new as far as the offense goes. No. Jerry Jeudy's very good, even though he dropped a couple balls that did not play well in the rain. The offensive line needs a ton of work. The running game needs a ton of work, and they need a quarterback. This is not news. And they also need their guys to be healthy. Not having David Njoku, not having Cedric Tillman, not having a lot of these guys. Like, your second option in this game was Jordan Akins. I mean, it's an unserious offense. So as much as I want to, you can pound on DTR and say he wasn't good, and I'm not going to argue that he wasn't good. He also didn't have a whole lot of help. So, I mean, to me, like, how much do you want me to beat up on the kid who's going to be in the offseason program and may or may not make the roster next year? It's sort of irrelevant. No one's pretending he's going to start next year. but he did do the job I needed him to do today. And hopefully he's better for it. The only thing that the bummer of this game is just injuries. We'll find out what the story is with Denzel Ward's shoulder. That's not good. Jordan Hicks goes out with what presumably will be a concussion. Not good. And Jerome Ford did hurt his ankle and then came back. That's really the only thing that sucks, but it is what it is, and the season's too long.
I would say this about the injuries. Nothing, as long as the concussion is nothing serious, none of the injuries are long-lasting, and does it really matter at this point if they have to sit out week 18 and get better for whatever? You know what I mean? There's nothing that's going to impact you next season. So as long as they're nicks and this and that, the other, as long as it's nothing serious with Ward's shoulder, then I think everything's okay there. I can't be too worried about it. Did you get the feeling that it was anything serious with his shoulder?
Anytime you see the word out is obviously concerning. It's not questionable, and they shut him down. When they say out, your immediate reaction goes, crap. It's something that's broken or something bad enough that he cannot play. So, and with Denzel Ward already, that's troubling. Now, hopefully it's, it could be like Nick Chubb where, he fractures his foot and it's not the end of the world, but like he doesn't need any more injuries.
Yeah, certainly. Hopefully it's just something that he can recover from in a couple of weeks and have a normal off season. We'll look for news on that. Jack, what are your takeaways from this one, bud?
Well, I just look at the last 2 weeks as a pair, and if you had Jameis Winston playing quarterback, you currently have 5 wins and you're picking 9th in the draft. And we're not talking great quarterback play, we're talking bridge quarterback level play. And we're at one where it's a realistic, we might pick number 1. You've got the Pats playing the Bills backups next week. You've got the Titans playing the Texans backups next week, because neither of those two teams have got anything to play for. But the two teams in picks 1 and 2, their head coach could realistically be fired if they have a bad game. So it's one where that coaching staff is going to be doing everything they can. The players, people talk about, the team might want the top pick. The difference is the front office might think that way. The players are playing for their careers, so they're going to go out. And it wouldn't surprise me if we end up sliding into that first pick by the end of Sunday. So very much in play that, hey, it might not be pretty this week or last week, but if we end up with the overall number 1 pick, we're in a great spot. Yes, it's a season that you don't want to go through, but if you're going to have a bad season, you may as well get the top pick than you sat there with 7 wins where... How does that help you? You get nothing better through the draft, and you just sat in the middle of everything. So, no, I think it's one where the offensive line played quite well, and that was basically my only takeaway on offense. 2 weeks running the offense line, they've done their job, which is good to see because there's a lot of money in it. Who knows if that's a certain Mike Vrabel kicking ass on the offensive line, as we heard this week, but... There's at least some positive signs because, hey, 6 weeks ago, it was realistic to say, do we just get rid of all 5? Now we can say, hey, is it 2 or is it potentially 3 we keep?
Jeremy's saying having the number 1 pick is never good. And I would agree with you, but if you're going to suffer through this season, at this point, the better position that you can land in, as long as, like Pete said, as long as there is nothing to be gleaned as far as momentum or, wins that will alter the trajectory of your organization, I think that the best position you can land in, the easier it is to stomach the record because you have a chance to get better faster, especially with that pick in every round of the draft, right? We're talking about a significant difference there. A question from Pat Shea in the chat. Can Jameis be a bridge if we fix the O-line and run game? I think you believe this is true, Jack. You want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, if we just look at the team, and if we wouldn't have had the small bite of Jameis Winston experience, we wouldn't be talking about Jerry Jeudy as a legitimate wide receiver. We'd probably be talking about, is Cedric Tillman wide receiver 3 material next year? And that debate has very much moved to, we feel great about Jerry Jeudy. We feel like Cedric Tillman's got a future because he had something like 6 catches for 9 yards, I think, when Jameis Winston came in. We'd seen nothing. So he's shown that these guys have talent. And Jameis Winston's boom on bust. Part of me would rather have Jameis Winston see what we've got on offense and really go for it than go the direction of someone like Jacoby Brissett or just a game manager that's going to tick along. You're not really going to be able to judge the true quality of the offense. And Jameis Winston has the talent to get you to the playoffs. And when you need 4 games of luck once you get to the playoffs, I'd rather have someone with the wide range of outcomes that is Jameis than you get there. The first game, you've got a game manager against Patrick Mahomes, and you've got no chance. Josh Allen, you've got no chance throwing a game manager against those guys. But Jameis Winston on his day can do something special. It might all crash and burn, but gamble on a bit of upside. He's not plan 1, but I would be much happier than that with several of the other options people want to throw out there.
Yeah, I think there's a point to that on the high side. Like if you can capture his ceiling for a period of time, I think that's intriguing. Pete, where do you come out on this?
Well, I mean, I think, yes, he can be a better bridge. I mean, so much of it is you can eliminate volatility with a better defense, better run game, and then hopefully you are going to capitalize on more on the upside and more of the peaks and fewer of the valleys just by not being in 3rd and 13 as often, not forcing him to be in situations where he's either down on the scoreboard or down a distance. If he can play ahead of the sticks and they can just continue to move the ball by just turning around and handing it off and then potentially opening up more shots downfield or opening up more space in the field in general, I just think there's a lot of ways you can do that. Now, having said that, the weird way that this has worked out is like Jameis Winston is an option and he's also going to be really cheap. And because of the way that the Browns have a lot of really cheap options, they could do something like John Gruden did. I don't remember what year this was, where he brought in like Jake Plummer and like 4 veteran quarterbacks at once and just said, screw it, we're going to figure this thing out. And if you could do that theoretically with Kirk Cousins at $1.255 million, if he's willing to do it, competing for a starting job where he might not get that option elsewhere. If Steelers fans and some media are intent on running Russell Wilson out of town, you could go that route, but you could end up signing like 3 or 4 guys and say, battle it out. We're going to see who's going to be the best option or best room and go from there. If they don't find themselves in a spot where if they get the number 1 pick, it's Cam Ward, it's over with. But as far as if they don't hit quarterback this year, then that becomes the best path forward. It so much becomes line of scrimmage, great defense, and run the football. And they have the power to do that in one off season because you look at the teams that have done it. The Minnesota Vikings were talked about as a team with people on the theoretical, or at least I should say media putting them on the hot seat. I don't think they were ever actually on it. Or the Steelers, they're going to be, both these teams were projected to finish last in their respective division while the Bears were expected to finish in the playoffs. And they want, and Sam Darnold has been phenomenal. That's why he's not leaving. But it's fundamentals for them. They win the line of scrimmage. They play great defense. They run the ball. They can keep other teams off the scoreboard and then get enough to win football games and compete. Is that going to be enough to get you in the postseason? Maybe. But the bottom line is it's going to get you in a better place. And either way, the best possible thing the Browns can do, regardless of who plays quarterbacks next year, is to do everything in their power to make this team as quarterback friendly as possible. Right now, it is not. And that's so much of what needs to happen. And that's not to say that the people in the building now are the answer. I don't think any of them are. And Jameis Winston may or may not be the answer to being even a bridge. But what they have right now, obviously offensive tackle 6 right now is not helpful at left tackle. Ethan Posick, he's playing better, but although he seems to somebody is mangling protection calls. Seeing Calais Campbell come off the line of scrimmage unblocked, and then we're mad because DTR gets called for intentional grounding when he never had a shot. Those things need to be cleaned up. So that's their best path forward. Make this the most quarterback-friendly room possible. But the flip side of that is the defense continues to get better and better. And that's part of the shame of not getting 2 in this game is and Jalen Waddle is the Browns played really well against the Kansas City Chiefs on defense. They played really well last week on defense against the Cincinnati Bengals, who, Patrick Mahomes 1 week, and then you get all the firepower of Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Joe Burrow and Chase Brown. And then you play well in that game. And then if you were able to now play well against Tua and the Dolphins sort of at their best, it would have continued to give you reason to think that this defense has sort of figured it out going in next year. And the key to that, and I continue to hammer this, and we're not going to stop, it's young guys. Myles Garrett's phenomenal. And Dalvin Tomlinson is very good, and Shelby Harris is going to be back next year, out for the rest of this year, also very good. But Isaiah McGuire is outstanding right now. Mike Hall and Juwan Briggs are both rookies, and they're really, really good. And it's not going to show up on the stat sheet. I think both guys were credited with a single tackle. But like on Myles Garrett's second sack, God only knows why, the Miami Dolphins doubled Hall.
Yeah.
And then Myles Garrett's able to easily beat Patrick Paul for the sack, and Mike still able to beat the double team. Isaiah McGuire is forcing everything back inside against the run. And like Juwan Briggs is coming in and cleaning it up. And he's not playing. I think he only played like 17 reps in this game. But and the sample size warning is there. But even if that's all he does as a 7th round pick, he's been outstanding in that role. Can he do more than that? I'd like to find out next year. And you just continue to build on. That's a second-year guy and 2 rookies that have completely transformed the expectations on defense. And the thing that makes them so valuable right now, obviously pass rush is certainly the most valuable thing, as Jack will hammer home as we talk about the draft and stuff. But Juwan Briggs is a really good run defender. Isaiah McGuire is a phenomenal run defender. And Mike Hall was expected to be a pure pass rusher, and he's been a way above average run defender so far. So what does that allow you to do? Put teams in now what we saw a lot in this game, 3rd in long distance, 2nd in long distance, obvious passing situations, and then the Browns can manipulate their lineup. You saw a little bit of movement. Myles Garrett lining over the right guard, for example, and they can play all these games. And this was a game where I don't think the secondary played great. I mean, I love Grant Delpit. I like Juan Thornhill, but like I don't think the corners were crushing or anything. The defensive line was so overwhelming, and it helps that they're playing Tyler Huntley. He's not a great quarterback, but they took away so much just because they were so dominant up front. So if you have even a functional offense, you win that game easily. And that's where we find ourselves. And that's where I don't have the energy to be mad at these guys on offense right now, because if they were functional, to Jack's point, they'd have 2 more wins these last 2 weeks, and they would have had wins earlier in the season as well. So like if you compare, the burden of watching all the other teams play football is you see all these teams, they're sort of in this 3-13 mix, 2-14, whatever. The Browns are so much better in terms of position relative to their talent than a lot of these other teams, where like we'll use the New England Patriots, for example. Now they are thrilled. Drake May is really, really impressive. They got nothing else, like nothing else on that team. Or Tennessee, they've spent all these resources and they're trying to build that offensive line, and the offensive line is still terrible. And they've got no quarterback. They've got a bunch of guys they've paid a ton of money to, their free agents, but it's not necessarily their young guys that are playing well. So there's a lot of these teams. The Raiders are Brock Bowers and 3 guys named Jeff. Like that is their team right now. They just don't have much. Where the Browns, yes, we can all sit here and talk about how bad the offense is, and I get it. But you look at the defense, you're going, I've got half a football team right here. And if my kicker could kick, which is his own issue, the Browns would have more wins. So do I think it's reasonable for the Browns to address the offense in one offseason to get to a point where they're just average? Yes, they can easily attain average. The NFL designed to get you to average. Just make your other side defense great. Get it back to being great. And I think they're on the path to doing that.
Yeah. I think that's certainly in the realm of outcomes if they handle the offseason properly. I do have to express the offense. I know it's DTR running it, and I know you said there's nothing really to be gleaned from today, and I would tend to agree with that. It's just, man, I just don't even know. Like, I can't ever remember where there's pieces, right? There's Jerry Jeudy, who is good this year, and Jerome Ford has played well recently and things like that, right? But like they have no identity at all offense. Like, we have no clue what they are going to be as an offense. What, it all depends on who they decide to be their quarterback. We know they have to get better in the run game on the offensive line and all the things to make the quarterback position easier. It just seems like there is no direction with the offense going from one season to another, which to me is kind of baffling. Like, how would you, is that not something you're worried about yet? That's something they'll take care of as personnel is addressed. But shouldn't you be once again, I'll kind of just cycle this back and rephrase it a little bit because I'm rambling a little. Shouldn't you be addressing the personnel to match the direction you want to go offensively? And if you have no idea what your identity is offensively, how do you do that?
That gives you absolute freedom. You can design your offense around the personnel you're going to add to this team. And that's how you should do it anyway. So let's look at it this way. Let's say the Browns signed Justin Fields as their quarterback versus they signed Kirk Cousins as their quarterback versus they signed Jameis Winston to be their quarterback. You don't want them to all be running the same. I mean, you can have the same sort of larger framework, but ultimately that's going to change. And that would be the case if you were to make an argument for Cam Ward versus Shedeur Sanders versus Jalen Milroe versus Jackson Dart, whatever quarterback you want out there. I don't hate the fact that they have freedom in that regard. And ultimately the run game is going to be what I think they showed you this year. It's going to be a lot of zone, double teams, zone with kicker, using a lot of gap, counter, power, trap, those type of things. They just need the guys to do it. And when they've blocked it well, they've had an effect. So ultimately, I'm not worried about that. And the passing concept you use are getting guys open. And, it was such a big deal going into this season about choice routes. And here we are looking at it going, yeah, guys get open. So it's not a problem ultimately that you allow yourself to do that. So I think the basic framework is there. It's just the personality is ultimately going to be dictated by who's under center. It's no different than when going from Deshaun Watson to Joe Flacco last year. The Browns, to their credit, let the quarterback do a lot of deciding and how the offense is going to go. So it can manipulate itself, which is why, we often get this misnomer of, well, they're running the Kevin Stefanski offense when Jameis Winston's in there versus they're running the Ken Dorsey offense when Deshaun Watson's in there or DTR is in there. And the answer is it's the quarterback is dictating what the offense is because the Browns don't make them run plays. They aren't comfortable running. So they're going to make the biggest fingerprint on the offense and dictate what this thing's going to look like, which is how it should be ultimately. So I don't hate that ultimately because my goals don't change. I still want to win the line of scrimmage. I still want to run the football, and I still need to get a good quarterback. And not forcing myself to be locked into a particular lane gives me the freedom to find what is ultimately the best quarterback. So I don't want to rule out, especially in the situation they're in, if they don't end up with the number one pick. I don't want to put myself in a position where they're going to go into free agency and immediately have to rule out X percentage of quarterbacks because they don't do this exact same thing, this thing I want them to do. I want them to have the ability to get the best guy and then form the offense around him. And if they do that, I think they're going to be in the best position possible.
Yeah. So does that mean let me ask you this then, first decision you make this offseason has to be based around who your quarterback's going to be, correct?
Theoretically, I mean, yes and no. I mean, obviously, if you were to sign, let's use the example of, let's say they were to sign Kirk Cousins and keep Jameis Winston and sign a third guy, let's say Justin Fields. Let's say those are your three guys that you're going to bring and compete. You're going to have an open mind a little bit in what you want to do. But if you go in and say Kirk Cousins is our quarterback, then you sort of picked a direction. I don't think they're going to do that necessarily just because of the wide range of outcomes. Now, if all the quarterbacks they get are sort of along the same sort of area of the playbook, then it sort of picks itself. But ultimately, I don't think you need to. I think the playbook is the playbook for the most part. And it's just a question of where the quarterbacks end up in it.
Jack, as far as the offseason goes, identity wise, you talked about this. I think you're kind of in agreement, but priority wise, and say the Browns do end up with this top 3 pick, right? would you expect the Browns to trade back? You mentioned earlier.
Yeah, if they've got the number one pick and they like Ward, then go grab him. If there's another quarterback you love, you go and take them, because if you think a quarterback's got a good chance of being above average, top 16 in the league, just swing. You never mess around. Doesn't matter where you are at quarterback. If you think you're in that spot, just take the guy. Jalen Hurts for the Eagles. They didn't need a quarterback. They just thought, hey, this guy's good, we'll swing. And keep swinging forever and always. But if you don't like the quarterback, the key focus is you have to draft a quarterback in 2026. You are forcing yourself into that position. If you don't walk away from this draft with a quarterback that you go, this guy can be it, you cannot finish the 2026 draft with nothing at quarterback and go, oh, we'll have 2 years of bridge pay from a Cousins style player, because you're just not going to be long for the job. So I think if you're not going to go and address the quarterback position in this draft, and who knows, they could love a guy that they're going to grab in the second round. If they don't, though, I would look to trade down if possible. Go for a team like the Saints, potentially the Raiders. You want to pick a team that is going to struggle in 2025. You don't want to go, hey, the 49ers are in the middle of the draft, let's go and get the 49ers pick, because the 49ers are probably going to be really good next year. You want a team that is going to be probably in the top 5, because who knows, the Browns could trade down. They finish, 20th in the draft order, but then they have the 3rd pick because they got the Saints pick or the Raiders pick. That's what you need to do if you're trading down, because then you've got a chance at getting the quarterback of the future. In one of these 2 drafts, you've got to get a guy that you decide this is the guy we're going to bank on. Because if not, you're probably not long for the job.
That, and the fact that Jack wants to pick on guys with no job security because they'll give up picks they won't necessarily be using if they get fired. Look at the Jets. I mean, that's the dream scenario where you're getting them to trade picks they're never going to use. And when you have that stability, which the Browns should strive for, that's how it's going to work. Now, I agree with his assessment that 2026 is sort of their deadline, but I also think 2026 is going to have far more quarterbacks to choose from than this year based on what I've seen. Now, how good are they going to be? I don't know. I just think there's going to be a lot more viable options this year. If Jalen Milroe were to go back to school, or somebody decides to take him in the first round and just bet on all his talent, who you fall back. Like, I don't rule out the possibility that Sanders is going to be there in round 2 or the end of round 1. To me, I don't think he's a fit in this climate, among other things. But to me, it's basically Cam Ward and then Milroe. And then other than that, you're taking guys with tools. And even if I took Milroe, somehow, some way, I'm able to get him in the let's say I can trade up at the end of the first round to get that 5th-year option. I'm not ruling out the possibility that I'm going to take another quarterback the next year just because I want to make sure I have enough options. But that's the mindset I think they have to have. But that's also part of the reason I don't want the Browns to get into a situation where they force it, because to get to the point where they are building the most quarterback friendly system possible, they can't waste picks theoretically, to either trade to go get that guy or reaching for guys that aren't going to make sense in that vein. So that's why, if they trade down in Jack's point, which I'm projecting that will be very difficult unless the Browns have 2nd pick, because either somebody's going to talk themselves into shorter Sanders, which more power to him, or Milroe, or somebody's going to say, I have to go get what they feel is the Michael Jordan prospect in Travis Hunter. And I don't know if that's truly going to manifest itself, but that's sort of the most interesting thing. Other than that, I suspect the Browns are going to be stuck where they're sort of at, unless somebody's so compelled to go up and get an Abdul Carter or a Mason Graham or one of those guys, those truly, truly special players, where they're willing to overpay for them.
2 things about this. I keep harping on this, but it's important. To even get to 26, they have to do something in 25, in my opinion. So you either have to win close to or play competitive football late in December, or have a quarterback that looks like you have found your guy of the future on the roster that you drafted. I don't see any other way. I mean, like, if they go out and win 5 games next year, there's no way they're seeing the 2026 draft, in my opinion.
Maybe.
Just say with this, it's you could play the what if game. If you look at the Browns season so far and say, what if Jameis Winston started all these games? We're not talking anything amazing. We're talking about Jameis Winston here. They win the last 2, so we're talking 5 wins. How many of them early season games do they win? Probably another couple of them. We're sat there with 7, 8 wins, and it's like, I think, based on what I've seen from Kevin Stefanski over all his time, we just need okay quarterback play, and we're competitive. And so I think they'll be okay. But I'm fully with you, Brad. If they're talking about 4 or 5 wins next year, unless like we're talking about, hey, half the starters on the team are on IR by halfway through the season, then there's no excuse. You can't bomb it out again next season. You've got to show that progress. But I think we mentioned it on the pre-show. If Kevin Stefanski goes and wins a playoff game with Kirk Cousins or someone like that, they'll probably try to give him head coach of the year again, and everyone will go into a meltdown. That's because he just bobs up and down. So if guys are healthy and doing their job, Kevin Stefanski will win with them.
That at least look. Let's say, for the sake of argument, they go 5-12 because there are too many goddamn games. At least at that point, if Jimmy Haslam's going to cut bait, he at least can say to candidates, listen, I gave them a genuine shot to do this, and I can at least sell this job at that point, which I'm okay with. Like, here's the thing. I have faith that they're going to bounce back. I think the injury thing has been preposterously bad for them this year, to the point for the second year in a row. At some point, they're going to get some better luck at this. Just how the ball bounces on some of these things. They're second in the league in guys on IR, and they may be pushing for first coming out of this game. And at some point, your team just falls apart. I mean, if it's the same thing if the Cavs, if Donovan Mitchell goes out for the year, the season's basically over. They may make the playoffs, but it's over. You can't. Whatever you think of Deshaun Watson, just the representative of your starting quarterback going out for the year, it just changes the dynamic so much.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, look, I believe they will bounce back because there are so many things that I think, in the same way when they went 11-6, there were a lot of things that bounced in their direction despite the amount of injuries they had. And this year they've had everything bounced in the other direction. Just Murphy's Law of this thing, just end up back in the middle, and they're basically an average football team. Now, are we going to get into conversations about firing them at 8-9? I doubt it. I really doubt it, because I think Jimmy Haslam desperately doesn't want to. And again, I think what you can point at is the guys that are progressing. And again, it's on defense and beyond the defensive linemen, who I will continue to praise because it's literally the only thing I enjoy watching on this team right now. It's a blast. Ronnie Hickman is found good player. Like, Ronnie Hickman is having a way better season than most people realize, and he doesn't get a whole lot of credit. And he's ultimately going to slide into that Rodney McLeod role next year, probably.
Yeah.
Mohamed Diabate is sort of an uneven player, but he's a found guy as an undrafted free agent that's giving you really good play at times. Like, he needs to even out. But if they're going to have Jordan Hicks back next year, presumably they're going to have JOK back next year, and he's just a guy who's your third linebacker or fourth. Like, those are good positions to be in. So, like, you can look at those, and not having Cedric Tillman sort of hurts this argument a little bit, because right now, offensively, other than Jerry Jeudy, you're sitting there pointing at Jerome Ford, and that's sort of it right now. But there are a lot of these guys where, like, everybody loves to say the Browns don't draft and develop, except that I keep coming up with names that they are drafting and developing, or not drafting and developing, and they're able to keep finding these players. But obviously, because of the Deshaun Watson decision, which they deserve every bit of criticism for, it was stupid at the time, and it gets worse every day. That is going to overshadow everything else, but they are genuinely doing good things. Like, the thing with the draft, obviously, I will continue to talk about in terms of people who hate analytics and stuff. I want them to hit the ball hard every draft pick. But the other thing is, it's difficult to figure out how to draft initially. And, like, For example, I've seen people say Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah is like a genius in the draft. His first year with the Vikings was horrendous. I don't know if any of the players are on that team from that draft. It was bad. And they're at Washington, who's a playoff team because they found they lucked into a quarterback. And obviously they have a new front office and everything. But like their last 2 drafts before this one, like none of those guys are still there or have grossly underperformed what they're expected to do. But like when you look at 2023, which is the golden draft for these Browns, even though they didn't pick until the 3rd round and obviously did not hit the ball hard with Siaki Ika, just a flawed pick from the start. But they're starting to figure it out. Even last year, Zach Zinter could make this draft look so much better if he comes back next year healthier and plays well. But like that draft was bad. Last year's draft was just mediocre throughout. And yet now we're talking, obviously Mike Hall was expected to come in and play well. I think the question with him was how long it would take given his age. But the fact that they've gotten a guy like Juwan Briggs to come in and play really good football as a 7th round pick in that draft class is really helpful for them. And now you sit here and look, and we're projecting 11 picks. Could be more, could be less, depending on how they maneuver. And the other thing that sort of gives me pause when people are like, the Browns can't draft and they can't evaluate talent and they can't do this or that, is then the same people will come back and say, well, they can't possibly use 11 picks. They can't fit all these guys on the roster. Well, which is it? Do they have no talent or can they not, they have so many guys that they can't fit talent on the roster. So this draft becomes pivotal for them. And that's part of the reason I think that them sticking to fundamentals and doing really smart things like, I'll be pushing for Abdul Carter all offseason long, unless they can get that number 1 pick, and then it's Cam Ward, and I get it. But like, if they were to hit on those picks this coming year and pick up on the track they've been on, they can really get good really fast in terms of doing the big things they need to do. 1, getting young talent, which they have more of than people want to give them credit for, but they need more of it. And then 2, reducing the overall cost of the roster, which is critical for them, particularly on things like the offensive line. That's going to be a big focus for the offseason. Was going to be regardless of even if Deshaun Watson was the greatest quarterback ever, that was going to be a focus for them this offseason. They had sort of lined up the dominoes in a way that this was always sort of positioned this way. Zach Zinter was part of that. DeJuan Jones was part of that. Luke Whippler was part of that. 2 of those guys have season-ending injuries, so we'll see what happens with them. But there's pressure there, certainly. And then the pressure is also there to continue doing some of the things they've done really well at, which is hitting on 2nd and 3rd tier free agents. I don't expect the Browns to be in on any of the top tier 1 free agents. I don't think it's realistic for what they're doing. But the Shelby Harris level free agent, the Juan Thornhill level free agent, the Obanya Okoronkwo level free agent, those 2nd and 3rd tier guys where if you miss, it's a bummer, but it's not the end of the world. And I think at this point, it's safe to say that Okoronkwo has not been what they've hoped he would be. And I'll defend Juan Thornhill. I think he's way better than a lot of people do. But Shelby Harris has been an absolute home run for them relative to the price they paid. Like, they need to keep doing those things because, Maurice Hurst has been an utter bust this year, but you don't care because it cost them nothing to bring him in. Like, it was a no risk move as opposed to I'm struggling to remember his name. Dude on San Francisco, the defensive tackle the Browns were in on that ultimately signed there for $1 billion, has not played well for them, has been injured a ton, and has already restructured to take a pay cut. Javon Hargrave.
Javon Hargrave.
The Browns were in on Javon Hargrave, pushed to the end, and thankfully they didn't get him because he's been a miserable signing for them, just not being healthy. Or Draymond Jones was another guy who was terrified they were going to sign for $17 million a year. He's not worth $17 million a year. So don't put yourself in those positions and get those 2nd and 3rd level tier free agents, which is going to be really important in terms of building the offensive line and continuing to fill out the rest of the defense. Because if you can get those 2nd and 3rd tier guys to fill out what they already have, I think they're going to be far better and can address the depth issues that we're all going to have. That we're all going to question because of the amount of injuries they dealt with. Everything the Browns do this offseason is good. Well, do they have a 17th offensive tackle? Because God knows they're going to need one, or a 3rd punter, whatever it is. They're going to need to be able to get as many of these guys at low risk, see who can be effective type contracts as possible.
Yeah, that's fair. I was going to say this real quickly about Travis Hunter because you mentioned it, the kind of the intrigue around him. I don't listen. I get the intrigue, but here's my thing. If you need a wide receiver, there's better wide receiver guy prospects. If you need a corner, there's better corner prospects. So why do you take him? I don't get it in the top 3.
I think he's a phenomenal wide receiver, but I'm having more and more questions of him as a corner, in which case immediately it takes a little bit of the shine off of him because theoretically he can do all of these things, but then you're asking him to do it for what you hope is 20 games. It's an insane lift
crazy
for anyone. So I don't think it's realistic. Now, how does that break down? Can he contribute in multiple ways? Yeah. And if he can realistically play 80 snaps a game, that would be a huge value if he's everything you expect him to be. If he's a full-time wide receiver and part-time DB of some sorts, or if he's a full-time corner and part-time wide receiver, or he can do returns or whatever, then yes, there's added value as opposed to getting the guy I want, who you hope is going to be able to play like a phenomenal player at Abdul Carter's position, plays 80% of snaps on defense, just that one side of the ball. So there's certainly an argument, and Jack is more well-versed in that part of it because he hates defensive tackles for that reason. I'm sure if for a guy who doesn't involve himself much in college football can parse out the value of a guy who could theoretically play 85 snaps a game and just how valuable that is. So I can understand why people get it, why people want him so badly. I just don't think it's going to matter. And ultimately, my thing is, one, I think what Abdul Carter does, using him as an example, is more valuable. Granted, I know the elite receivers are supremely valuable. And the other thing is, I am more confident that Carter will be special at what he does than I am that Travis Hunter will be special at one of the things he's going to do, let alone both.
Yeah, that's just kind of my thought there. Jack, I don't know what you think about that. I think asking him to play both ways in the NFL in today's, 18 games or 17 game schedule is a bit much. Maybe he returns kicks and plays corner, or returns kicks and plays corner and a touch of offense. We've seen that from some guys in past years. Either way, if you need a good, if you're looking for a receiver, there's better receivers. If you're looking for corner, there's better corners. Now he's up near the top of both, but at what point are you cutting yourself off because of his ability to do more than one thing, when in the NFL that's not really that realistic?
Yeah, I think you'd be the full-time corner that plays a bit of offense just because it's hard to jump out there and just take a handful of corner snaps, whereas it's easier to jump out there and take a handful of wide receiver snaps because it's all on you and the quarterback rather than you're relying on the other 4-5 DBs that are potentially out there. The teams I think it makes more sense for is just like guys like the Raiders, guys like the Bengals, guys that are just cheap. Just cheap because they don't have the money to pay 53 guys, which seems nuts to say, but they just don't. So if they can get guys cheaper that can play a bit of both sides, I see it. And hey, Raiders, it's going to help sell jerseys. And that is something that Jimmy don't care. Why does it matter to him? Whereas guys that sell tickets, guys that do that is important to some of these other teams. So I don't see it as a move. Quite frankly, yes, it does tick my boxes of there's 5 premium positions: quarterback, wide receiver, left tackle, edge, and corner. But I'm trading down if I've got a top 5 pick, and partly for the money as well. They're going to be an awful lot more expensive if you're taking a guy in the top 5. You trade down 10 picks, you can add $5 million a year talent just by moving down. So it's worth come down a little bit. Get Pete Abdul Carter, make him happy.
Well, he's not going to be there at 13, unfortunately. So yeah, he's top 5 where he's not happening. That's ultimately the problem the Browns are going to have to deal with. If somebody gives you a package that's so good, then so be it. There are guys I will happily take at 13. I can happily add Luther Burden to this offense for example, or somebody else. There will be somebody else. But if the Browns are sitting there going, I want to add a premium talent that's going to not, let's lay it out here. Myles Garrett's going to be here for a very, very long time. However, eventually he will not be. It would be nice not only to get him a partner in crime. Let's use the Steelers as an example. Cam Hayward is an aging veteran defensive tackle who is now, I think, 53 years old and still playing at an elite level. But the Steelers were not content to just sit and just be good with that. So they added TJ Watt. So eventually Cam Hayward is going to retire. And they've still got TJ Watt, and then they've continued to add, and they've got guys like Keanu Benton, they've got guys like Alex Highsmith. So the Browns need to get that premium pass rusher anyway. They lost Z. He was their best guy opposite Garrett. Carter, to me, gives you that, and I'll get into a whole – once the draft order is finalized, I will get into a whole bunch of reasons why that is. But it gives you the premier guy opposite Myles now, and God only knows how teams are going to protect against that. And then – eventually, in another decade or so, hopefully he's going to have a Calais Campbell-like run because he never gets hurt. That some point, Abdul Carter hopefully is going to be that franchise pass rusher, whether he's Micah Parsons 2.0 or something else, that you then are talking about replacing Garrett with another guy to then carry on that legacy for Carter. Like to Jack's point, and this is why I continue to applaud the 2023 draft and will continue to say this is the way it should be handled. Other than the defensive tackle they took in Siaki Ika, and I don't have a problem with taking defensive tackle, but that one was shit. They took quarterback, wide receiver, corner, D end, and and corner. They got the five. They got all. And then they obviously took a center, which is fine. They took him in the 6th round. But if you are able to hit on any of those, and it looks like they've hit on him with Isaiah McGuire, if he was get into free agency, is probably a $15 million a year defensive end right now. He's that good at what he's doing. And people can complain about his box score or whatever. If you are somebody who subscribes to PFF at all, he's the 3rd best run defensive end in the league behind TJ Watt, and I don't even remember who the other one is. 3rd. And he's no reason he can't get better as a pass rush. And he's 23. He's a stud at what he's doing. So you hit on those guys, immediately valuable. If DeJuan Jones comes back and plays starting tackle again, he's a $15 million player who's making $1.1 million next year, $1.4 million, something like that. Those positions just have an insane amount of value. So you're always encouraged to take as many of them as possible because anything you can't readily get in free agency or trade for or those things, draft them as often as possible, because if you hit, you win. And you're always in a position of power, which is how they should operate. And that's why I'm going to hammer on why also I think the Browns are more inclined to take Carter than somebody like Mason Graham, just over their preferences. And the other reason I think they're more inclined is the stuff I'm seeing from Juwan Briggs and Mike Hall and those guys that I want to see more of. But just keep hitting those positions over and over and over again, and you're always going to win. That's what the Eagles do. That's what the really smart teams do. And I think if they do that, they're going to be really successful. And hopefully they don't hopefully they win enough that it's not a conversation and we don't have to talk about this. But you don't want to get rid of people who understand how the game is played and do it at a high level from the GM perspective, even if this is the thing with the Deshaun Watson thing. Yes, you could absolutely fire them and be justified for that. But if the Browns aren't going to, then what am I left with? Well, everything else I want them to keep doing.
Sure. It makes a lot of sense. I get it. I remain concerned about the offense.
Yes. What? There isn't one. Like,
they are dead last. They are awful. Their offense, they're injured. They don't have an identity, and there's no answer at quarterback on the horizon. So there is some concern there. We agree. A running game has to be developed. You have to make the quarterback position easier, but that only gets you to average football. Like, competing for something meaningful, you look around the NFL, you need to have better than just a bridge and a good run game and a good defense. Like, it needs to be better than that. Look at the weapons in Minnesota and what they're doing. Think about the Green Bay game today. Look how good Jordan Love looks. Look at these other teams around the NFL that are at the top of their divisions. They have special players all over the place. And the Browns are just lacking that on the offensive side of the ball outside of Jerry Jeudy.
I'm fully with you. They need to do more in the draft at the offensive positions, and I think that will happen. I don't know, looking at the very, very top of the draft, whether that guy's there. If they move down to sort of the 8 to 15 range, maybe with 2 trade downs to get to the 15 range, be really cheeky. Add a future first and a second this year. In a couple of different moves, but it's one where they can then get into the discussion of, hey, is this a sweeter spot to add more offensive talent? But they've got to keep hitting there. I think the roster will look very different once we get to once we finish free agency. I know I spoke about Aaron Jones as a guy that I would love to go out and target for $7 million, an above average pass blocker, an above average receiver, an above average rusher. $7 million, just pay that and get it done, because there's a high floor there to go with whatever quarterback it is. And we can go out and invest in the O-line, because if Joe Bitonio retires, Pochich out the door, Wills is gone, well, that is a lot of money you can go and spend there. That's 30-odd mil that you've got, and you can go out and invest. If Teller goes, that's 45 mil you've got. You keep Conklin, and you can rebuild as much as you want. There will be guys out there. They just need to decide what scheme they want to play, which was your point, Brad, but they can do that and decide. They've got time to have that conversation internally, and then they can go out and invest. It's a weird dynamic where they need to decide what they want to do, because you pick your coaches before you pick your players. But they can always tweak these things. But they've got to have that philosophy, and that's what they will sit there. And they've got a few months to go and decide it. People focus very much on what the draft picks will go in and do. The needs are going to be filled through free agency, the trade market, stuff like that. The draft is about 2026, not about 2025.
Right. We expect him to fill the needs in the draft, in free agency, and then proceed in the draft after that. Right. That's just what Barry has tried to do in the past. So I expect that model to be followed. We've talked about the money in the first. We'll go back, watch the pregame show today. We broke down all the contract stuff in great detail. With Watson, the Browns will be able to spend some money. It seems like they need an influx of weapons at running back, at wide receiver, so we talked about a lot about Elijah. Where you stand with Elijah Moore right now, Pete? I know he looked so much better with Jameis and looked really good, and has looked non-existent with DTR, and that's dependent. But do you want to bring him back still?
Yes. And the thing is, by virtue of them doing this, I think his market has gone down. If you can get him re-sign him for 1 year, $4 million, done, in a heartbeat. I don't need him to be, a number 2 wide receiver. I need him to be a number 3, number 4 wide receiver, and I need him to be competent, and he can do that. I need Jerry Jeudy to be a dude. He's doing that. I need David Njoku to be healthy and play his role. But if I'm gonna, I need Cedric Tillman to be healthy and be able to continue growing. But you've got draft picks already here. You guys, see what Jamari Thrash can do in terms of development. You've got David Bell coming back. I don't know what they're going to do with him. I have no idea what the status of his hip injury is. You've got a lot of these guys that you've sort of got to make decisions on anyway, but they can continue to add. I just don't love this draft class of wide receiver after the first couple. But ultimately, I think if you don't re-sign Elijah Moore, I think you have to go and get a guy that's basically going to be what Elijah Moore was. So I'd rather just keep him and roll it back with that, especially if I can get him on a, like I said, $4 to $5 million 1 year deal, or 2 years for $8 million, and I can potentially with an out next year or something like that. I think he's more than added. Again, you use Jameis Winston as the example. When he was in there, Elijah Moore was a contributor, a guy who could
he looked
make
great.
plays for you. So, I don't need heroes. I need guys who can do their job. And Elijah Moore is a guy who can do his job. He blocks. All these guys block. I give him credit for that. But yeah, you just need to keep adding.
How concerned are we about Tillman at this point?
I think my issue with Tillman is we've only seen such a small sample. So we know, was it 4 games where he was with Winston, looked good. Might not have even been that much. It's not enough that I feel good going into next season with this same wide receiver trio. I think if you can get more and more drops into sort of your 4 battling with Tillman, I'm in an okay spot. But I still think they need to go out and get a legitimate wide receiver. That's going to come with price. I don't think, in an ideal world, I'd happily spend 20 mil and get Chris Godwin. But that's just not going to be realistic. I don't think Chris Godwin's going to go, hey, I want to go and play with potentially Kirk Cousins or God knows what here. You're going to go somewhere else where, hey, Patrick Mahomes wants you. You're going to go there and have a lot more fun. But I think they will be on the lookout for anyone they can find. And I think they'll be willing to part with 10 to 15 mil, even if it's just like a 1-year thing of just get someone in. I think they'll be willing to spend. That might be the one spot where they go, hey, we're going to... It'd be a second-tier wide receiver because the first-tier wide receivers don't even make the market. But that's the one spot where I need to dive into the names, but they will be willing to just throw a bit of money because if you've got Judy, you've got whoever free agent, Tillman, Moore, you're in a good spot. With no Jamari Thrash is not good enough yet to be that wide receiver 4. He can happily sit there as the 5, draft someone. Who knows? It could be that they're sat there in the middle of the first round and they go and draft someone. The second round, they really like someone. They can go really high, but just throw more guys in the mix. I'm not going to be worried if they've got 4, 5 legitimate wide receivers. That's a lovely, lovely place to be.
Okay.
As far as Tillman's situation, they're all, concussions are all created differently. The fact that they seem to think he's close every week suggests that it's just it happens where you just get, a concussion that just doesn't want to go away, but it's a bruise ultimately. So, I'd rather they be smart and let him heal all the way and come back. But I would not make the leap of going, well, if this is how he reacts to this one, then the next one's I should assume that it's going to be this long or anything along those lines. Just apparently this has been a bad one in terms of it doesn't want to sort of fully dissipate
it's
to this
weird.
point, which is, but I think, because here's the thing, we get into the bad science that people try to visit onto Denzel Ward. Denzel Ward at one point was out for a month, I think, with a concussion. And everybody assumed he was going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. And it just doesn't work that way. It's, all bruises are not created equally, but so long as you allow them to heal fully and 100%, that aspect is not going to sort of create bigger problems relative to concussions. The other issues, like when people get worried about CTE, it's more about the repetitive striking and things in the head as opposed to necessarily the concussions themselves, unless you're doing what they did in the 70s and 80s and you just don't care and you're just like, yeah, this is just how we do it. But that has gotten a lot better. Denzel Ward has literally talked about this when people were trying to once again retire him. So until the Browns come out and say this is a huge issue, and again, they've come out every week and said, listen, he's close or whatever, and then ultimately shut him down. So, I've seen it before. It's they go away, you move on, and it is what it is.
Does anyone want to have a guess between you two what the betting line has opened in the Browns-Ravens game?
I already saw
17.5.
17 and a half.
18.5. That
Good.
is insane.
Good.
Yeah, it's tremendous. That's a big line. That's a lot of numbers. You know what else is big? What did you say?
I think the Browns will cover. I think the defense will cover.
Yep. Yeah. The defense will have a good chance to cover. That's a lot of numbers to cover in any divisional game, in any NFL game ever. But so that's very interesting. Although the Browns did score 3 points against the Dolphins today. However, we will see, as far as that goes. But another thing that is critically important as we move on to 2025 is your personal health. And that is something that we advise you to go check out at Core Home Fitness. Look up our friends at CoreHomeFitness.com. Check out the assortment of lifting equipment, especially their top-rated adjustable dumbbells by New York Times and Men's Health. They're also rated a Best Buy by Consumer Reports. They've got videos and other products, the Glute Drive Plus, the Fight Master, so that you can crush your goals in 2025. We all make our 2025 New Year's resolutions to get better in ways, to become better people, become smarter, to learn something new, to get in shape is for one of them for many of us. And this is one way you can do that and make that commitment. They've got all kinds of adjustable benches here, so you can do the incline work, the flat, lay flat work, anything you want to do there, plus the adjustable dumbbells. And you will have your home gym off and running and enabling you to hit and crush those 2025 goals and become better as we head into the new year. So check out CoreHomeFitness.com. They've got a US-based support team, fast shipping, hassle-free returns. You name it, they know what they're doing, and we thank them for sponsoring the OBR pre- and post-game show. All right. Before we get out of here tonight, we've been doing this for an hour already. I saw this question in the chat earlier, and I'm going to rephrase it a little bit. It sounds like at this point, despite this, the Browns are 3-15, are going to be 3-14. It looks like they're 3-13 right now, right? So, with 1 week to go, they're 18.5-point dogs against the Ravens in Week 17. They look like they're going to have a top 3 draft pick potentially. The offense has been the worst in the league. The Watson trade has completely blown up. There's still talent on this roster, plenty of it. There's no reason to rebuild, in my opinion. I'll continue to say that. Miles said he doesn't want to rebuild. They weren't going to rebuild anyways. So don't worry about that, right? Just let's worry about taking care of this contract. But changes in the offseason, are there any that you could foresee coming along the coaching staff? I don't think it'll be Stefanski. I don't think it'll be Barry. I think we've talked that out, right? But are there any other changes you could foresee coming that are justified in what we've seen football-wise this year, or that may be likely based on what quarterback you bring in, or the changes that need to be made going into 2025? Like, they overhauled this entire offensive staff to make Watson better. So what happens when he's not a factor now?
Nothing. Like that's not even true. Like, the Ken Dorsey part is true, but
What do you mean it's not even true? That is.
They did not hire the entire offensive staff for the sake of Deshaun Watson. That's insane. Their running game sucked last year. You and I complained about it endlessly.
Okay, yeah, but it was to create an offense with his agency that allowed him to succeed. So
Sure.
Not fully that way, but would you accept that phrasing of it?
Yes, but they also did things because it's just the way the NFL, one, where the NFL is going, and two, what they have. They're not going to run it. Like, for example, when Kevin Stefanski got here, they're obviously running an offense with Austin Hooper and David Njoku as their double tight ends. They don't have that personnel anymore. So why should they run an offense that sort of caters to that? They should cater. Right. They wanted to go to more of a spread look. They've got more receivers to play in a spread look. They've still got David Njoku who can play in a spread look. So your personnel dictates. The running game, asking DeJuan Jones to run wide zone is stupid. That's not what he is. So that part of it, yeah. I mean, am I going to fire Ken Dorsey? No. People hate Ken Dorsey, and I sit here and watch the play calls work. I see guys who are open. I see a lot of good stuff. And all we ever hear is that he and Kevin Stefanski have an excellent working relationship. So how much do you want me to punish Ken Dorsey for an offense?
Anybody. I'm not talking about just Ken. I think Ken will probably end up being back, but anybody.
Overall, I have no idea is the honest question because I don't have enough information. Like, I know a lot of people hate Andy Dickerson, and I look at the cartoonish situation he's been plugged into. If he's not good, Kevin Stefanski should get somebody better. But it's hard for me to judge based off of him showing up to a job without 3 tackles and being like, all right, fellas, let's get this thing going. Like, his job has been an absolute nightmare. And whoever deserves the credit, they've been better as of late. Now, I still think I don't think they have answers. I think they have improved relative to a very small sort of possible number of outcomes, but they are sort of better on that. I think Jack Conklin is fantastic. I think White Teller is inconsistent, but when he's good, he's really good. I think Joel Bitonio, if he wants to come back for another year, I'm not going to tell him no. I have no interest. Like, I'm sure Ethan Postic is a very nice guy. He's trying his hardest. He's just not very good. And I think there are going to be better options in free agency for that position. But so if you want to, ultimately, I'm looking at this and saying Kevin Stefanski should make any changes he feels are necessary. But like, just based on the information I have, it's very difficult for me to judge because another guy who people love to hate, Casey Kinnaman, Chad O'Shea. I think Chad O'Shea's done a really nice job for this team, both in getting more, getting the top receivers to play like top receivers, and then developing Cedric Tillman and getting Elijah Moore to be more, and getting them to block. They block at a really high level. And then also in his role as passing game coordinator, getting things to sort of help in getting things to be open. So I'm not ruling out anything. Kevin Stefanski could fire anybody because he thinks there's somebody better out there. And if that's the case, he should. But if you're just asking me based on what I'm looking at, it's really difficult with the information I don't have to say this guy should absolutely be fired because it's just unrealistic.
I agree with you. It's hard. We don't have all the information. It's just like, and I understand, and I'm just kind of trying to play devil's advocate here because I don't really think that, I don't know of anybody that I know should be changed, but I understand when people are saying they're going to be a 3-win team coming from an 11-win team where they changed the entire offensive staff. Someone needs to be held accountable, or something went horribly wrong here. We know it was Watson, yes, but it's also more than that. So where do the changes need to occur? Like, you can't just say run it back.
Why not?
So for me, the changes I'm making as the players more. There's plenty of guys I'm ready to gut and move on from. I'd happily rebuild the entire left to center, even to Teller on the offensive line, and I would gut that. I think the running back room is a significant problem. I didn't like it coming into the season because Ford's actually had a better year than expected, but Ford is a second running back in a rotation. Nick Chubb, based on this season of what we've seen, you'd be polite to say he played like a second running back. He's played like a third running back. It's just not been good enough. So let's be optimistic and say he's second running back quality. If they go into the draft with Chubb, Ford, and Strong, and then they draft someone, it's not good enough. And people could say, they could take some running back with a 5th pick or something. It's like, it's nuts. You just don't know what's happening in the draft. And
I do.
Whoever Cam Ward could slip to 5 and we need to take a running back because we've not added a running back. It's like, you just lost the plot. But it's one that when it comes to coaching staff, it's so impossible to know. Even with the same with GM and head coaching candidates when they're out there, we just don't get enough information on the outside. I expect Tommy Rees to leave because anytime when he was the backup to Bill Belichick getting that head coaching job. So I doubt he will be here. Who knows? Maybe it's one where they've been really, really impressed and they just promote him and Ken Dorsey's out the door. But it's going to be interesting. I think the key thing is, though, got to have more talent because there wasn't enough veterans that outplayed their contract. Myles Garrett, Shelby Harris, Hicks, JOK did. There wasn't many. There was more that underperformed it. You've got to be playing better with those guys. The young guys played really well. It was the veterans that let the Browns down this year. Okay.
And I love your response, Pete. Why not? I intend to agree with you. Because in the NFL, it's hard to win. Sometimes if you have a bunch of injuries and you have a starting quarterback that you think is one thing and he's not that at all, or he's not even 1/10 of that. Go ahead, Jack.
I would say I looked at last year and I was like, this is a 9-win team. Let's 8 to 9-win team that lucked into more wins. And in all honesty, I think we're probably a 7-win team this year that's been on a really bad luck streak, where we look at the last 2 weeks. We've mentioned Jameis Winston plays, their wins. There's 2 wins in the start of the season. And it's like there is a level of variance that last season, they weren't great. They're just the defense was elite and the kicking game was elite. And that moved a lot of wins up, and that built an expectation level that just was not realistic. If they won 8 games last year and they win 7 games this year, I don't think people are quite as upset of where they are now. And it's the way the cookie crumbles.
People are still pissed. That's the thing. Just for all the reasons you laid out, people are pissed that they had the elite defense, that they had all these things. So if they were a 7-win team, I think the disappointment is basically the same. The difference to me is 4th place doesn't matter. Like I should say, I continue to view it as you either make the playoffs or you don't. Anything short of making the playoffs, I don't care. Like it sucks to be potentially 3-14. Don't get me wrong, but
yeah, you want to play meaningful football this time of year, whether you get in or not.
Yeah, but like 7-10 doesn't do anything for me ultimately. And like
still,
to me, now I say that I want the team to feel good about themselves. I want the team to feel like they're closer than 3-14 might suggest. But ultimately, the NFL is a league of playoffs or not. Like I will hear guys on the radio or media complain about 4th place finishes. No one cares. No one ever cares about 4th place finishes. They only care about if you're in the playoffs and then you're in the game. If people talk, like coaches and GMs talk about this, get into the tournament. Nothing else matters, because at least at that point you're in there and you have a shot. So if I'm not in the tournament, then it doesn't matter. Like the rest is just degrees, and people who want to get angrier and angrier every week and compound the failure that they aren't going to make the playoffs until they get themselves so irate that they talk themselves into blowing up the franchise and doing this, that, and the other thing. It's unnecessary. So to your question of, if the Browns believe in the coaches they have, then they should stick with them. Like I firmly believe that Kevin Stefanski's not going to do anything that he doesn't feel like he should do. I don't think he's going to be pushed into it. So if people want to complain that he didn't fire guys on a 3-win team, I don't care, and I don't think he's going to care. Long as they come out and produce him. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's his call. So I don't fall into the idea of this idea of flogging people, although I'm perfectly happy for them to take Deshaun Watson out and flog him if they want for the season. But to Jack's point, I do think it comes down to the roster, and injuries are a huge part of that. Like, how much do you want me to get mad at guys who are hurt? Like, and I'm not saying you're saying this. I'm just saying this is the general, like when you get into accountability and stuff, like, what do you want me to do? David Njoku's missed like 6 games this year. Like, how mad should I be? Denzel Ward is hurt. JOK has missed half the season. DeJuan Jones has broken his ankle. There's a lot of this going around. Like, and then people want to play, well, if they had done this, and like we got into the whole thing of like, well, if the Browns had drafted a quarterback earlier than DTR, and then you actually go look of this past year's draft class, and it went from Bo Nix at 12 or whatever he was selected to the 5th round before another quarterback was taken. Like, we have to play on with the field as it is. We can't make it into something it isn't. Like, it's the same thing where like, well, the Browns should have signed DJ Humphries, for example, and then DJ Humphries misses half the year, and then he comes back and he immediately gets hurt for the Chiefs and has done nothing for them. But like, people will still use this as a thing to, get mad at the Browns because they didn't do enough at the tackle position when they're on their 6th guy. There's only so much you can do. But to the point of, where's the accountability? It's going to be on the roster. That's where you're going to have it. It's guys can't make $15 million a year to be maybe average guard. If that's what you want to look at, they can't make $15 million to be a bad tackle, a bad teammate. That's where your accountability comes in. So that is where the change has to happen. And that's the thing. Like, it comes down to talent. And again, if Kevin Stefanski wants to fire guys, maybe he will, maybe he won't. Maybe a guy like Tommy Reese will get hired somewhere else. Maybe he'll get promoted here. Maybe a guy like Ephraim Bando will get promoted somewhere else. Maybe he won't. But like, welcome to the real world where the Browns have people and this, we've seen this in the front office. It's going to happen in the coaching ranks as well. The Browns have other teams want. And that's where I'm not in a hurry to try to keep getting rid of guys, because there are a lot of people that everybody else is sort of looking at the Browns going, I wish we had him. I like to be in that position.
We can get rid of Glenn Cook for my 2 comp picks.
Yep, there you go. Here's what I would say. My biggest thing in kind of along with what you're saying, Pete, is the reason that I am okay with giving everyone a mulligan in this season coming up in 11 is right here, right? The key injuries and the awful play of Deshaun Watson. Now, are they ultimately responsible for Deshaun Watson? Yes. But at the same time, I still feel like they have the right coach in place. Okay. And the right people in place. And I'd like to give them one more year. Now, at the same time, though, one last thing I'm going to push back on, we're going to get out of here, but we've gone way over. But there, to your point, Pete, like, there's the playoffs or nothing else, right? To you. Others, I think, feel like they want to play competitive football in December and football that matters at the end of the year, rather than being out of it for like the last 6 weeks. I think there's a big difference in that. And there's also in this season where they're historically bad on offense. Mm-hmm. So you can be good, bad in the middle, and then you can be historically awful on offense. And at that point, that raises some questions, even with Deshaun Watson. Like, you couldn't do any better than this with what you had?
I think I feel a lot worse if we went straight from Watson to DTR and we didn't have the handful of games with Winston. I would feel a hell of a lot worse now, and I would be not far off panicking. But having seen that sample, I'm a lot more chilled, because guys were wide open with Jameis Winston. It wasn't like they were just, this has happened, someone slipped, they busted coverage and stuff. Guys were wide open. So the guys can get wide open. We just need someone to throw the ball. And that's one that I look at that and I just extrapolate that over 17 games. I'm like, yeah, we were okay. And I get that
the team played.
Not everyone feels that way.
Played for him. It looked like the 2023 version of the Browns for a couple weeks there when they were in the, at Denver, the Pittsburgh game. Both sides of the ball rallied around him, and it looked like the Browns that we recognized from last year. Although it was short-lived, we did see that for a stint, correct?
Yeah, and that's why I feel so calm that I'm like, why not the Browns in the playoffs next year? I'm not making those comments without seeing the sample of Winston. And the sample of Winston is I think we can find better quarterback play. And if you get better quarterback play than that, 17 games, how far do we want to go? Yeah, we might not win the division because the Ravens are really good, the Bengals are really good. But who cares? If we get to the playoffs, so be it. You get in that dance, you've only got to win 4 games. As long as you qualify for the dance, 4 games and you've got a ring. It doesn't matter what happens in the 18 weeks. You've just got to do enough to tiptoe over the line. And the 7th best team, basically half the teams make the playoffs. That's a nice position to be in. So I think, with all honesty, why not the Browns in 2025? They can go out and take Watson money out of it. They'll probably have the 8th most expensive roster in the league, not counting the $46 million that's going to Deshaun Watson. That is a lot of talent you can put out there. And if we're building a quarterback room that is Jameis Winston on $4 million, it's Kirk Cousins on $1 million, it's, who knows, it could be Cam Ward as well in there. Let's go crazy. Let's throw Zach Wilson in there, couple of mil. Let's throw DTR in there, $1 million. That's 5 guys. Let them battle it out. Who cares? We'll see what happens. Yep. But give me bodies and any of that collection, whoever's best. If we get to the end of camp and Kirk Cousins is washed, gone. Zach Wilson's not good, gone. We'll go Winston for 4 weeks, turn to Cam Ward later in the season. Fine. Just give options in there, and whoever plays the best, let's go with it. And that whole room's cheap. So let's throw a nice running back in there. Let's throw a nice couple of extra offensive linemen. There's no reason the talent level has to be poor. They will go out and spend. Give me the playoffs. That's what I want. I want to be in the playoffs, and I don't mind if we lose once we get there, but hey, we can have some fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And ultimately, the goal is to win a Super Bowl, but I'm with you.
I'd say the difference is the goal of the GM is to get to the playoffs every single year. The head coach is the one that has to just elevate them enough to win those 4 games. I think it was a
Interesting.
Ozzie Newsome quote about the goal of a GM is to get to the playoffs every single year. And with average quarterback play, if you give Kevin Stefanski a 16th best quarterback in the league, he'll get you to the playoffs every single year.
Interesting. Before we get out of here, guys, tonight, 20-4 or 20-3, pardon me. I don't know where I got 4 from. 20-3 loss to the Dolphins. Tried to sneak an extra point in there for the Brownies to help that offense I was talking about. All right. Before we get out of here, thank you guys for watching the OBR postgame show. Hit like and subscribe. Keep it locked to the OBR this week. And, of course, this offseason where the Browns are going to be facing these critical organizational decisions. Pete has been all over the coverage, killing it daily. Jack just knocking it out of the park with the contract coverage. Get over to the OBR.com. Take advantage of 50% off. Become a VIP member today and become part of the best Browns community going down right now. You guys got parting words before we get out of here, Pete?
Subscribe to the newsletter. That's always good. Plenty of video and show stuff. We'll have some big news coming, but I'll leave with this. I mean, Zach Wilson's probably going to be the guy that a lot of people are suddenly interested in based on 2 things: the Jets and Sam Darnold. And that may be, again, I think what Jack is talking about, what I've sort of laid out, is the best option, which is to get like 3 guys. I will not be surprised if he's a sought-after commodity for the Browns to see if they can't recapture whatever people thought he had, and just lay it on the Jets and say this is just a dysfunctional organization, which they are. Shout out Brick, that they can get him in a situation that they can get functional football play out of him, and then maybe recapture some of that talent and get another quality option, quality swing.
Good stuff. Got to take swings at quarterback. Go ahead.
If you check out the OBR site at 3 a.m. in the morning Eastern time, there'll be an article under the Deshaun Watson contract, what it all means, what's going on. By all means, if you want to know that beforehand, listen to the pregame show. The first 40 minutes of it, we didn't hype up this game too much, but we did chat everything to Deshaun Watson.
Yeah. Everything on the contract, ins and outs of the restructure, and everything we know about it. So 3 a.m. is Does It Matters Go time. Good for you, brother. Good for you. A better man than me. All right. With that, we're going to get out of here. Thank you guys for tuning into the OBR postgame show. Over 1,200 of you stopping by here today. Hit like and subscribe. And we'll see you this week. If we, if I don't talk to you before then, everybody out there in OBR land, Browns fans, everybody, have a wonderful new year. And we'll see you in 2025.